Today we're going to show you how to become a better runner in just 30 days. We do know that becoming a better runner, of course, is a long-term project. So this isn't necessarily a quick fix, but if you implement these things, I can assure you, you will become a better runner in the next 30 days.
Most people who want to run faster think that in order to run faster, they've got to push themselves harder. And I know it's counterintuitive, but the first step to improving your running in 30 days is to make sure that you run your easy runs easy enough. The reason why we need to run our easy runs easy enough is because during easy runs, we are trying to get a very specific physiological adaptation. That adaptation happens over a fairly broad range. And as we move higher and higher up that range or to a higher intensity, we are putting more and more stress on the body, which opens us up to a higher and higher risk of injury, and it starts to push us closer and closer into a different type of physiological adaptation. Plus, it increases our level of fatigue, which prevents us from being able to run fast enough on the days that we need to run fast so that we can develop our speed. So let me just reverse a little bit and unpack that a bit. The easy runs are there to develop our aerobic ability, our ability for the body to utilize energy in the presence of oxygen. And there are a lot of physiological processes that we are trying to stimulate during that process, right from drawing the oxygen out of the atmosphere into our lungs, through the alveoli, into the blood, and then in the circulatory system with the heart and blood vessels to shunt that oxygen and some energy substrate down to the working muscles, where we have capillary beds that we want to increase the number of capillaries in those muscle beds, so again that we can improve the diffusion of that oxygen into the working muscles, and then inside the muscles themselves, where we've got mitochondria that produce the spark that is necessary for those muscle contractions. And of course, we also have the reverse processes to take waste products or byproducts of energy metabolism away from the muscle and ultimately get carbon dioxide out of the lungs. That's really the process that we're trying to stimulate, and as I said a little bit earlier, that happens across this very broad range of intensity. And the important part for me, and the crux of why it's so important to run at the right pace, is that physiological stimulation or adaptation happens pretty much the same whether you're running at the lower end of your aerobic zone, zone 2. You'll hear coaches talking about it in slightly different ways, easy running, but the adaptation will be the same at the slower end of that zone as it is at the faster end of that zone. But as I pointed out, the impact forces, the damage on your body, the increase in fatigue is much higher at the faster end of that pace range, and it's much lower on the slower end of that pace range. So if you do your easy runs easy enough, you get the right physiological adaptation at far less damage and cost to you as an individual, and that means, very importantly, that you will be fresher and able to push yourself harder and to run faster in the sessions that you need to help you become a faster runner.
The next thing that we want to talk about here is fueling your training. You wouldn't drive your car on empty, okay? So you can't expect to do that to your body. You have to give your body the fuel it needs for what you're asking it to do. In particular, when we're talking running, it's an endurance event, and we predominantly use a combination of fats and carbohydrates. So we really have to ensure that we're getting an exogenous or an external source of carbohydrates, because while we're running, eventually what happens is the glycogen gets depleted out of your muscles, and so when we're putting in an external source of carbohydrates, that is almost just topping up those stores throughout your run. It is really, really key that we do fuel our runs. I know that there's a big movement and trend towards running in a fasted state. I think it is absolutely vital to fuel your training, to give your long and easy runs as well the sort of fuel that it needs for the entire duration. In particular, when we're doing our higher intensity runs, that becomes even more imperative, because the higher intensity you work, the quicker your stores deplete. And so you want to ensure that you're going into those runs in a good sort of energy state. And the reason is this, that if you fuel your runs beforehand, you're up here and as we run, we deplete. And then afterwards, we obviously want to refuel. If you don't take some sort of fueling in beforehand, you're starting in a depleted state, and then we're depleting even further. That affects your overall recovery, it affects your muscle resynthesis, it affects your next training session, and it affects your improvements overall. So it's really, really key that we fuel before training. It is also very important to fuel during your sessions, and even more important than that is fueling your sessions after your training. You want to refuel what you have now used in your body. So essentially replenishing those muscle glycogen stores, some protein for some muscle resynthesis so that your recovery is better and your improvements are better over time. So what does fueling before your run actually look like? I always get a lot of pushback on this topic. People saying, oh, well, I'm running first thing in the morning, I can't run on a full stomach, or I struggle to eat in the morning. Don't get me wrong, I'm one of those people as well. And so we have to find other ways just to ensure that we're still getting that energy source coming in. Very often a slice of toast with peanut butter or banana will suffice for those easy shorter runs. I'm a massive coffee addict, so I always have coffee and perhaps half a banana with maybe a few scoops of peanut butter. Be wary of the peanut butter from a fat perspective, just because it can affect the gut a little bit. One of the really effective tools to use if you struggle to eat and have solids is to have a fruit juice beforehand. So half a cup of fruit juice, and in particular a berry juice, not necessarily an orange. The orange is quite high in fructose, and again, that can have an effect on the gut while you're running. And so we're looking more towards a cranberry or a blueberry. Blueberries are very high in nitrate, which is excellent for exercise metabolism. And so half a cup of fruit juice before your runs is a very effective way to just ensure that you're fueling your session and going to give your body the best chance of getting the most out of that session. When we're talking about refueling after our sessions, the window in which we do this is really, really important. So we're looking at 20 to 30 minutes after your session. You want to get some form of carbohydrate protein mix after a run in particular. So the ratio of carbs to protein is 4:1. And my go-to for this, and it was my favorite day in the science, is when they said that a chocolate milk is a great source for refueling after your sessions. So chocolate milk, the milk, there's a leucine protein, which is really effective in muscle resynthesis. But the key point here, more so than what you're taking in, is the timing of it. So 20 to 30 minutes, make sure you get some form of carb protein mix to replenish, and then thereafter you can go and have your breakfast and so on after your shower and all the rest.
Another key aspect to improving your running in the next 30 days is to sleep more. Sleep is such a critical component of recovery, and if we want to train better, train harder, and improve our running, recovery is a critical aspect of that. Obviously, we all lead different lives, and we've got different reasons for why our sleep time is compromised. So typically, I don't like to give people an ideal number of hours that they need to sleep to get the best out of their running, because then I watch their eyes glaze over and they don't want to hear any more about it. What I encourage people that want to put in a particularly hard training block, work towards a specific goal, or get better at running in just 30 days, is to look at ways to get an extra 30 to 60 minutes over and above what they're getting right now, because you will recover so much better. There are also a couple of little tricks that we can use to get the most out of the sleep that we are getting. And the first of those is to get a sleep routine. So get into bed at a similar time every day. It is important what time you get into bed at night. And we have done a really great video on sleep and how to get the best out of your sleep. So if you're interested, please click on the video on your screen right now.
We've spoken in previous videos before about how strength training improves your running and makes you a better runner. This is still the case, but we're talking about improving your running in 30 days. And strength training is going to take a couple of weeks just to start getting those adaptations. But mobility is something that is going to change your run today or for tomorrow. It is such an effective way of helping you become a better runner. And when I'm talking about mobility, I'm not talking about flexibility. They're different concepts, not just stretching a muscle around a particular joint. I'm looking for stability and movement around a joint. Runners in particular have very, very tight hips, tight hip flexors. If you're someone who sits at your office all day, you're always going to have quite tight hip flexors, and that sort of gets us in this position. And we need to have our hip flexors having the ability to be able to move all the way back, so that and your hamstrings pull your hip flexors all the way back so that you can drive your leg forward, and that gives us that running momentum and drives us forward and makes us faster runners. So if we can loosen up the hips a little bit, if we can get a little bit more movement in the hamstrings, a little bit more movement in your ankles, that is really going to make you a way better runner. So again, I'm not talking about flexibility, we're talking mobility, and we want to ensure that you've got stability around a joint, but moving through that range of motion at the same time. Okay, so let's talk practically about what I mean by mobility and some things that you can do. So we're talking about the hips and the lower back, and we really want to start getting a lot more mobile there so we can get that range of motion. An excellent exercise to do, or mobility exercise to do, is what we call the world's greatest stretch. We don't call it that, it's actually its real name, I promise. And so the world's greatest stretch is like this. If you have your right foot forward, make sure that you have your left leg back, and your left knee can start off on the ground. Eventually we want to get that left knee off the ground, but I don't want to see your bum in the air. If you have your right foot forward, you put your left hand in line with your right foot. Make sure you give yourself about half an arm width sort of space. That left hand stays on the ground. That is an anchor. It does not move. From there, you are then going to get your right elbow as low down to the inside of your right ankle as you can. Hold that there for 1-2 seconds. Then take that right arm and reach that up to the ceiling. Make sure you rotate your whole torso. So make sure your eyes follow your hand. That is going to help you rotate the whole torso, keeping that left hand solid on the ground. Hold that there for 1-2 seconds, and then we repeat this process 5 times on each side. Really, really key points to look out for is make sure that your front leg is staying upright. We don't want to see any sort of leaning towers of Pisa over there. Make sure that leg is upright. And as you lean that elbow down, don't push over your toes. Make sure you've got all the pressure on your heels so that you're not leaning forward over onto your toes. So that world's greatest stretch is such an effective exercise, and I can assure you it is going to help your running. You can do that every day, and actually if you do, it's really going to help you. It's going to take you 5 minutes, first thing in the morning. It's probably going to loosen up your lower back as well and set you up for the day. You can also do it before your run. So instead of just getting up and going running, as a bit of a warm-up, you can do that as well, and it will just really loosen up the hips for your running. Some other things that we can look at, and this will be individual to where you maybe are struggling with mobility or range of motion concerns, but some of the other things that we like to look at is ankle mobility, and I know this sounds weird, but big toe mobility. Ankle mobility is really, really key because of how we run and the way our foot works. Every time we land and strike our foot on the ground, we have to ensure that we have good ankle mobility. And I know this also sounds weird, but if you are struggling to get quite deep in your squat, it very, very likely can be because of your ankle mobility. And so if you have poor ankle mobility, you probably are finding that you're leaning forward in your squat and not able to go all the way down. And then let's dive into the big toe stretch. So why are we looking for mobility in our big toe? Every single time your foot touches the ground, in part of the running gait is an aspect of what we call the toe off. So every time you step, we do that, and we step off onto the ground and we land again. And so if you don't have the mobility in your toe to do that, you're really going to struggle to get that sort of propulsion phase going forward. What you can do, slip your shoe off and keep all the other toes flat on the ground and just try and lift your big toe without lifting all the others. Try it now, you'll see it's harder than it sounds. And if you are struggling and all the other toes are lifting, you can cheat a little bit, use your fingers to hold those toes down, teach the body what we're wanting it to do, and as you do that over time, you'll start seeing that you'll be able to lift your big toe without lifting the other toes, and that is also something that is going to help your running overall.
If you take everything that we've been through on today's video and you implement that into your training for the next 30 days, I guarantee you will be running faster by the end of those 30 days. If you want help with how to implement the things we've gone through today in your day-to-day training, then click on the link in the video right now.